great time to read poetry, but I didn't write much. Oh, I'd play around in the summer a little bit, but mainly I was teaching and grading papers.
And raising kids.
Yes, and that too.
So that when you retired, you gave you the opportunity to
It
to
did.
spend more energy on what
It
you really
did.
loved.
I was ready then to explore my own voice more.
Mhm.
And, but I have to think that all those years of teaching, I was gathering what I needed.
Mhm.
I was feeding my soul during those years too.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's been mainly since I retired that from teaching.
Yeah, but that's such a full-on, encompassing kind of exercise, teaching.
Yes,
Yeah.
I envy and have always envied the academic poets who can teach
Mm.
and still find time for
Mm.
their own creativity.
Mhm.
I think it's a unique person that can do that.
Mhm.
Do you have, where's your time for poetry? Do you have a time?
A time.
Mhm.
You mean in a daily practice?
No, just
practice?
like, is it, do you notice that you usually write in the evening, or is it like any time the poem comes, or?
Mine tend to come in the morning. I'm not an evening person. I'm not a night person as far as creativity goes.
Right.
I have more creativity in the morning.
In the morning.
Yeah. Although I can be writing about something that struck me almost any time of day,
Mhm.
but the actual writing
Mhm.
probably happens in the morning if it's
Mhm.
going to happen. I write every morning when I first get up,
Do you? Yeah.
faithfully. It doesn't always become a poem, but
Mhm.
it's there waiting to become a poem, and
Mhm.
sometimes it does.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then do you have a time where you go back to things, or do you work on things and then let them go?
Oh, I am such a reviser. I work and work and work
Mm.
on what I write.
Mhm.
It goes immediately into the computer, but
So do you write longhand first and then?
I do. Yeah,
Mhm.
I do. I like the feel of a pen in my hand.
Mhm.
But immediately, then that day, it goes in the computer.
Mhm.
Oh, same day.
Oh, same day.
And then do you go back to work on things in the morning too, or does the morning
If
for
I
writing?
like it, I will work on it all day and not even eat.
Ah, there you go.
Wonderful.
But, that's a rarity, isn't it? It's such a gift when that happens.
You're so involved.
That you
Yeah,
just
taken by the poem.
do not know what time it is.
And then the poems sometimes find their own paths, don't
Mhm.
they? They start out one way and then suddenly they change.
They do.
We have a friend, Jack Mueller, who says you have to let yourself be ambushed
Yes.
by the poem.
Yes.
And I love that. I love the almost violence suggested in that phrase. It has that sense of violence, I think, in your day. It disrupts every other thing
Mm.
when you have that full-on ambush
Mm-hmm.
where it takes over. And I think in the best case scenarios, we get out of the way. We get out of the way almost completely. And serve the poem. Let the poem know the most. Although,
That's
like
got to be
you-
hard for you, Rosemary, with a young family. If you get ambushed while you're making lunch, what do you
What
do?
do you do?
Wait.
Wait.
Thank you, poem. Come back later.
Well, do you ever have that experience that you hear a poem and you say, oh, I have this down. I know the line.
Oh, boy.
It's such a great line.
Oh boy.
If you
It's
think
it's
you're going
on
to
my
remember,
heart.
you can
Oh,
forget it.
yeah.
And then it's gone.
It's gone.
You go back to remember
That's
it.
right.
Oh, yeah.
We're creatures of writing. We learn to write.
So true. Yeah.
Whereas it's interesting, a lot of the younger kids don't. They will remember and they don't write, and they do play with language in the moment more than
Yes.
holding on to it like we do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was reading, just scanning a piece in the New York Times today, talking about poetry, and the the idea is if you, or really it would work for prose too, any kind of writing. The key to being able to write frequently, often, every day, is to discover something new every day.
Mm-hmm.
Just listen, be aware, be attentive,
Mm-hmm.
and discover one new thing every day. That doesn't mean, you know, some large discovery, but, you know, discover that the magpie, the blue of the magpie's tail
Mhm.
is the same blue of the ocean right at sunset
Mm.
in Newport Beach. I mean, something like that, you know, I think is what this person was writing about. To just pay attention to what's around you,
Mm-hmm.
and that's hard to do. You have to allow yourself to not be so busy all the time to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Be still.
Well, see, and it's interesting to me because I think that that also is an ambush. It doesn't have the same violence, though, right? It's a much quieter
Mm-hmm.
surrender, right? But it is, in a way, a surrender. It's a putting down of an agenda and an opening, a willingness to open,
Mm-hmm.
to be available to what is new, or just to what is.
Just to what is.
Just to what
I
is.
think.
What is. You know, that's that.
I always like Carlyle's explication of creativity that has three elements. First, the perception, and then the taking apart, the kind of understanding all the pieces, and then putting it together again in a new way. And I always think that we're so good at taking things apart, you know, deconstructing.
Mm-hmm.
But perceiving, to be in that place of receiving
Yeah.
what's around you and letting that inspire you, that is a real gift.
And then the last piece, poem to make. Right?
That's it. Put it back together somehow.
Put it
And
back
then you get to use artifice. I think that's something that, I think for beginning poets, it's a little hard to understand how important it is not to transcribe a memory or an incident or an epiphany, but to recreate it, to use the skills you have of language to make that happen for the reader,
Yeah, right.
not
Yes.
just record what happened to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that is a big leap.
Mm.
And I teach I don't really teach, I lead a workshop of writers that meets once a month. And this is one of the things we've been working on a lot. And I think they're all more coming to see that because we'll use the term backstory.
Mm.
We'll say, you know, your first stanza is really the backstory.
Mhm.
It's really what led you to the poem.
Mhm.
And the poem really starts after the backstory. But you're right, it's a temptation to be very linear.
Yeah.
You know, that is, David Wagner would say that backstory is what a title is for.
Ah,
And that you could put all that backstory into the title.
mm-hmm, you could.
Mhm.
And
I think
sometimes
some
that
of the,
happens.
some very satisfying titles are backstory.
But it's interesting as you do performance, though, because then the title becomes sometimes an interference.
It can be a real
I really
problem.
often don't like titles. I'd much rather an introduction. And oftentimes, with some poems, after you've performed them enough, the introduction, that backstory, is an essential part
You're right.
of spring-loading the metaphor so they jump out. And if you haven't set the trap, then people don't catch it.
Mhm. So when you say introduction, you mean if you were reading to a group, you would spend 2 minutes introducing the poem?
So a lot of poets do that, not everybody.
I know they do.
You have a single chance with the performance, so that if you read a poem on the page, you can go back to it and catch it. But I think in
It's
a
true.
performance, you have one shot. Is that part of what you're saying, Artful?
Well, there's that. I mean, it's just interesting because there's oftentimes when I don't want any title, I don't want any intro, I want to go right into it.
Mm.
Because the piece stands alone so well that it just jumps.
Mm.
But there's other pieces where over the years I've developed a little intro that is offhand and is conversational and relaxing,
Mm-hmm.
so that when you get into the gnarlier metaphor, people get it
Yeah,
because they have a little understanding of sort of the conversational place you came from.
yeah.
I think, I think that sometimes introductions can be too long.
Oh, way too long. Yeah, yeah.
Very impatient. And I'm
Some-
not talking about your
No,
case,
I hear you. Yeah,
because, you know,
that's true.
Rosemary pointed out the difference very clearly
Mhm.
between performance and poems that are on a written page.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very impatient when a poet has to tell you so much background. Why read the poem?
Why read the poem then? Yeah.
I think the poem should stand by itself.
Mhm.
You know.
One of the most effective things, though, I think I ever remember with this was Rosa Griffin, from
yeah.
Bedrock,
Yeah.
who had a poem called Worm Wrangler. And she starts off the poem by just talking about her experience as owning the store in Bedrock. And slowly you realize that she's started to rhyme and she's gone into meter and we're in the poem. But it happens very subtly, so subtly that it just kind of, the shift happens before you know it, and then you're like, and then you're in it.
Oh, you thought she was introducing
You
the
think she's
poem.
just introducing, and she is. But
Uh-huh.
it was so masterful. It just
Yeah.
starts conversation, but because the poem itself is actually a song that has a poetic intro, and it's a versed thing with meter and rhyme. But it happens very subtly, and next thing you know, she's launched in, and we're full force into
Well,
the
I
poem
think that's
itself.
a gift.
It was, and it just
Yeah.
blurred completely that line between the intro and the poem
I
itself.
think that would be a very special kind of genre almost
Yeah.
of poetry
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be able to do that well.
Well, it was exciting. It was
Yeah.
exciting as an audience member because it caught me right off guard. I'm like, whoa, we're in. You know, it was fun. You're right, though. It takes it, and because it was verse, so that you had that clue
Mm-hmm.
that you were in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think we should listen to.
I think
some
it's
of
time
Beth's
to hear
poems.
some
Okay.
wonderful poetry.
I'm ready.
Beth, I'm looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you. I see you have this podium up here. Is that meant to be used
Yeah.
or
can be
walked
in
around?
any
or?
way you wish. Here, if you're going to do that, I'll move this chair for you.
I know that seems too formal somehow. I'd feel like a preacher if I was standing up there,
You
or a
don't
choir
need-
director.
Yeah.
I need to move around a little bit more. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as Art and Rosemary said, I'm going to be reading tonight from my new book, Canyon Notes, that came out in the early fall. It's a collection of about 45 poems that were written in the last 3 to 4 years since my last book, Wild Raspberries, came out.
Mm.
And I'm pretty happy with it. I think it shows where I am with my writing right now. I think that's one of the reasons we like to put out a new book, if we think we have enough good poems, is to show people where we are now in our writing. And I'm in a different place than I was 4 years ago. So the book has shows that evolution. The other thing that I think probably poets know, but maybe not everyone knows, is when you go to put together a book, you can't just take all your poems and say, this is a book. You make piles, and you have a trash can handy, and you go through and go through and go through until you're finally happy with what you think belongs in the book. And then becomes the work of how do you put it in the book? Where does each poem go? And that too, in a way, becomes a poem, because you're as a poet, you're creating when you make the book, and so it's all part of the process, I think. Anyway, too much introduction. Now to a poem. Bellevue. Bellevue. It's one thing to know the block was torn down to make a park. It's another to know how few people remember steep, hilly Bellevue Street, which sounded more like a park than 2 rows of terraced pre-war houses and apartments anyway. Who recalls those homes with their polished front rooms, used only for Sunday company, kitchens smelling of cabbage and potatoes, dim basements where the coal was dumped, or the small yards where grass struggled under the feet of mothers hanging out wash, or porches where men in undershirts sat and smoked in summer, watching their kids play statues and catch fireflies. Who will know the girl holding her doll in a snapshot in a box of old photos? And when no one is left who can remember, isn't the street gone anyway? There was a wildness even then. Broken sidewalks, untended roses, weedy hills in some backyards. One I used to run to the top, look down, heart pounding, and still see home. That poem came out of the experience of having a friend of mine who knew this part of Kentucky where I lived for 7 years when I was a young child. And he said to me, "Oh, I don't think that street exists anymore, and they made a park there." So, perfect place for a poem.
Better than a parking lot, right?
Yeah.
I think so. The next poem is called Great Grandmothers, and what I tried to do in this poem is give the feel, get into the mind of a child. Remember my great grandmothers as I experienced them as a very young person, very young child. 1, Grandmother Witch. In a rustle of bombazine, she leans on a cane, all black and cackles, this hag from the country few want to remember but can't forget. Yellow-skinned moon face, she offered a snaggle-toothed smile to us children. Her black eyes pierced through old round steel spectacles. When she chucked our chins, her clenched fingers pinch a shriveled up apple with a bun of gray hair, unwashed and ripe as old bacon rinds. Swish, swish, she won't settle until someone seats her, and then he melts. Grandmother Powder Puff. Pillowed in flannelette on the front porch throne, she's a cushioned queen. Face, arms, legs, torso, rounded and downy, she's the cushions herself, with a crown of soft hair white as hen's feathers and small blue eyes peeking between crinkled lids. When we venture close to kiss her soft cheek, we smell talcum powder and cinnamon. She's the bun, our overstuffed doll, who laughs and nods at us and sleeps, we think sometimes, in a back bedroom bed that's just big enough. So I think children can have imaginations, maybe without the freedom to express them, these things. But as an adult, I can do that. So that's how those 2 poems came about. Two parts of poems. For something a little different, this is called Food Bank. On Tuesday afternoons, they come for food. Men and women, older children come. They write down their name and phone number, an address in the county where they live. Men and women with young children come. Each family gets 3 plastic bags to fill. If they live in an address in the county, they smile and say thank you or gracias. Each family gets to fill 3 bags with food. Canned beans, spaghetti, soups, boxed cereal. How to smile, say thank you or gracias. when you have no job and winter's long. They choose cereal, beans, spaghetti, foods so unlike in Veracruz with its blue sea. Here, when you have no job, winters are cold. In one apartamento, 2 families share. So unlike the blue sea of Veracruz, a mountain town, Colorado, USA. 2 families sharing one apartamento. On Tuesday afternoons, they come for food.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you might know that was the Pantoum form, where you have the repetitive lines
Mm-hmm.
to emphasize the thoughts, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought this one worked. This next poem comes out of the experience of being absolutely overwhelmed by studying a book called Factory Girls by Leslie T. Chang, who actually lives in Ridgeway. But I mean, she's a nationally known writer, along with her husband. I did not know that at the time. I was just so overtaken with the with the subject of the book, and eventually a poem came out of it. It's called "Smoke of 1,000 Factories," and I have this excerpt at the beginning. Since the 1970s, China has witnessed the largest migration in human history. 3 times the number of people who immigrated to America from Europe over a century. Okay, so that is within their own country. They have had this huge migration. Smoke of 1,000 factories. To know the road ahead, she asks those coming back. Like them, she says she's going out, leaving her village for Guangzhou. Since she's a daughter, her family lets her travel far by train and bus through that corridor until clouds become smoke of 1,000 factories. She knows you must reshape your foot to fit into a new shoe. Whatever work there is, she does. Tells the boss she's a quick learner and that she finished school. She says she'd glued soles on before, joined parts of plastic toys, stamped out metal tools, or sewn up designer purses. 12 hours, 6 days a week. Work washes away her thoughts beside 100 other Gongchang Nuhai, long hair tied back in ponytails, wearing white shirts they launder nights, who dream of moonlight in jade mirrors and enough money to send home to buy an indoor toilet. She shares tea shop meals and cell numbers. In Dongguan or Shenzhen, it's so easy to lose someone. Maybe she'll find a better job, jump where she can earn more yuan. You ride a mule while looking for a horse. Some tiger girls work hard, learn English, get promotions and departments. When you're poor, you must change yourself. A jam is not polished without rubbing. So that was a different experience for me, to try to get into the mind of a factory worker. And now let's see, something a little different. Okay. Had a lot of fun with this one. By the way, these poems that I've read so far are kind of from the front portion of the book, which tends to be a lot of poems that are more about relationships and people. And as the book continues, there's more of an emphasis on the natural world and the environment. That's kind of the arc of the poem. But I had fun with this one. because what I wanted to do was write about spending time in Ireland, because there was such amazing language to listen to there, lots of new words. I wanted to use sound in the poem, and I wanted to use rhythm. And I followed a rhythm that a California poet named Linda Dove developed: 3 beats, 2 beats, 3 beats, 2 beats for the couplets, and tried to follow that as well. Her emphasis on the sounds of words, making the sounds of words carry the language through the poem. So the title of it is Fáilte Éire, which means welcome to Ireland. You see it everywhere when you get there, airport. Fáilte Éire, and that's enough.
Are you Irish or descended from Irish people?
I'm not,
Oh.
but I had some people who were help me with the language, so I do my best. Fáilte Éire, day late to DUB, we strolled its streets of booted girls, lads leathered, rejoiced with Joyce, past P.O. bullet holes, stalwart statues, bolted the bar's bangers, then bridged the Liffey. What sounds resound for us? What era echoes? City chaff and church bells, or the quiet kells? What sights? The barren Boran, Wolls at Blarna, or Wicklow's glacial gap? Yellow gorse glow, or hedge-edged green fields, gray sheep graze? Larches lurched by wind, wet heathered hills? At Muckross, we touched moss rocks, sucked mussel broth till light clocked the blue loch. When music began at Horgan's, we crowded into a grand mandolin, fiddle and flute, drank pints for who stayed, Sláinte, and those who emigrate. That was fun.
That sounded fun.
Yeah,
it was
It was
fun.
great to listen to.
To try to do all of those things. And want to try it? Does anyone have a copy of the book?
I think.
I'd like to hear another voice with me, so
What
we'll do
page
it
is
again.
on?
It's on page 16. Okay, there's a
Nice.
reason for this, because I want to make sure everyone knows, day late to DUB. Well, DUB is
Oh,
Dublin.
The airport code
the
for
airport,
Dublin.
right. And why were we a day late? The ash cloud.
all right.
Remember that?
Yes.
Okay, so that's something personal, but it just lets you know. The bullet holes people know about being in the post office in Dublin from the Easter Uprising. The bar's bangers, Temple Bar is a section of town. The Liffey, of course, is the river. I think everything else is kind of self-explanatory. The Kells being the important illuminated manuscripts done from between the 700s and 800s by Celtic monks that are there now in Trinity College. And so, yeah, let's say it together.
You want to do it too, Art?
I tried
Sure.
doing the 2 to 3 beats, but I have trouble doing that and reading at the same time. So, all right, Fáilte Éire, day late to DUB, we strolled its streets of booted girls, lads leathered, rejoiced with Joyce, past P.O. bullet holes, stalwart statues, bolted the bars, bangers, then bridged the Liffey. What sounds resound for us? What era echoes? City chaff and church bells, or the quiet kells? What sights? The barren Boran, Wolls at Blarna, or Wicklow's glacial gap. Yellow gorse glow, or hedge-edged green fields gray sheep graze. Larches lurched by wind, wet heathered hills. At Mugros we touched moss rocks, sucked muscle broth till light clocked the blue lock.
When music began at organs, we crowded into a grand mandolin, fiddle and flute, drank pints for who stays, slancha, and who immigrate.
Yay, thank you, well done.
Slancha.
Bravo.
There were a couple that were tougher.
Yeah,
Lock.
yeah,
I wanted to say low.
I know, I think it's pronounced lock though, and,
Yeah, I did too.
and that's kind of funny because I thought it was Lou, and then when someone corrected me and said, oh no, that's lock, I thought, how cool, because I've got clocked in the previous.
Oh, yeah, right.
So great, it rhymes with,
Even better.
yeah. So that's great, you guys did great. Well, for something a little different then, let's see, how are we doing time-wise? One or two more?
Sure.
That'd be great.
Sure, okay. So these more come from the second half of the book. Okay, have to read this one. Page 37, Little Boys at Big Sur.
Mm.
It's very short. I didn't have to write this, it wrote itself. Sometimes the moon is a banana. That tree looks like a deer. I'm going to call this tree porcupine. I like to kick dirt because it makes smoke. When you throw the little stones in the water, you get stars. These leaves could be pirate ships. And sometimes the moon is a soccer ball. I had a lot of fun recording that one.
Yeah.
Okay. You'll find that children appear in some of these poems. I have grandchildren now. I have 6.
Oh my goodness.
Under the age of 7. So I have a lot of chance to observe and listen to and be inspired by these children. In fact, what I'm working on now is a collection for children. This is called Scavenger. It's a rather new poem that found its way in the book on page 31. And it keeps company with some other poems in this part of the book that are more environmental in topic. It's true that we are facing a time in our natural world where there are great changes happening. And we feel out of control. There are efforts being taken, probably not enough, and we're seeing some of the results of our use of the world now. So this is one that shows a city scene. Of course, we're used to scavengers out here in the country where we live, in the rural areas. But cities are seeing animals coming in that they didn't see before, more and more. This is making the news. This interface between the animal's habitat and people is being felt. Scavenger. Squawks and a black flapping made us look from lawn to road to where a turkey vulture stood, ruffled and intent on its terrible work of eating the limp body of a small squirrel killed by traffic. Under them, the pavement reddened as the raggedy bird with a hopping walk, ungainly as a high-heeled girl, dragged its find toward the curb, away from the oncoming cars. The children's eyes grew wide. They pulled us to walk closer, but we said, "Stay back." As the buzzard shook hard the young squirrel's body like a toy, in its sharp and efficient beak. Once sated, it flew up onto the neighbor's 3-story roof, white underwings catching light as it rode Austin afternoon thermals. Sense of smell or keen eyesight, what led it to its carrion? It probably came from a rocky roost or limestone cave by Barton Creek, one of a flock of Cathartes aura who hunt in these suburban streets, open shrubland now hard to find. When the kids looked sad, we told them the birds eating was just nature's way. They said they already knew the word endangered meant animals have to fight for their place in the world. Then we all went back to the yard to play. Okay. Moving on to something yet different. The last section of the book I find is, or I intended to be, a more spiritual or lyrical section. And the title poem appears in that section, which I will read in just a moment. This is a poem that I want to share with you, though, because it came out of an assignment that my poetry workshop group made to each other. We said, write a poem where you bring a lexicon of something you know how to do and use those words in your poem. So I chose needlework, and this is what came out of it. Moon directions. Before you start to make a moon, measure the width of sky and gauge the distance from the sun. Next, out of a knot of stars, hook light on its fragile needle. Be sure to cast on stitches enough to reach the frothed hems of all the blue seas of the world. Work circle-wise for the desired size. Then slip its white curve off and bind the edges with a single caught breath. The sea is also a needlewoman, and with kelp her strong thread, she stitches a beach. Her fabric shined silk the moon rides, on which she embroiders the white borders of waves.
Mm-hmm. Oh, beautiful.
Okay. I'll end with the title poem. This took had its beginning in a very small little notebook that I carried in a Ziploc bag down the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon for 8 days. And wrote in it a little bit every day, a very little bit, because there wasn't much time. But then eventually it turned into a poem. And then I started working on it a lot. And it grew and it shrank and it grew and it shrank to its present form. Canyon Notes. 1. How to understand river. Ride 8 days on its back. Between walls, time curved a mile deep. Rose, blood red, gray, green, black. Not yet speaking its language. Give it words. Rapid, silt-laden, shimmering. Mornings wake to mud color riffles, where current, surge, and splash wet shirts to flesh shivers. Afternoons dream in still places, skin hot in sweaty drowse, until dusk shades the river platinum, its rush muffled by cool sand where pink tamarisk grow like feathers among boulders and sacred datura open, diaphanous as moths, where at night moonlight rides on ripples cast with uncountable stars. 2. By day, desert landscape dazzles. Sandstone towers and spires, red, pink, granite, black, schist, burnished by water and fire, above a trail you walk, framed by yucca and cactus. When at last you lie down in a cave pool of waterfalls, Stone Creek woman appears with hair of emerald moss. 3. Black raven skims across rock rampart. Great heron wades in blue-green water. Canyon wren trills down a red cliff. Blue-collared lizard flashes between stones. 4. Canyon of earth's blood, you teach my body to live in a cadence of rest and work. Heart, a symmetry of float and swell, breath to know no certainty. At the end, when I reach calm water, I take you, river, into my arms and bear the burden of such beauty in a handful of fine sand.
Mm. Mm. Mm.